don't we just bring on Mr. Wilcock right now? Would you please introduce the world's most brilliant person, in my opinion, anyway?
Okay, absolutely. David Wilcock is a professional lecturer, filmmaker, and researcher of ancient civilizations, consciousness science, and new paradigms of matter and energy. His upcoming Hollywood film, Convergence, unveils the proof that all life on Earth is united in the field of consciousness, which affects our minds in fascinating ways. David is also the subject and co-author of the international bestseller, The Reincarnation of Edgar Cayce, which explores the remarkable similarities between David and Edgar, features many of David's most inspiring psychic readings, and reveals documented NASA scientific proof of interplanetary climate change and how it directly impacts our DNA. Welcome, David.
Hey, how you doing?
Oh, David, we're so thrilled to have you on here.
Well, it's thanks to my psychic ability that it happened. I had fallen asleep in my recliner, and I got psychically awakened.
When, today?
I had a really late night last night hanging out in Santa Monica with my friends, and I was reading up on some screenwriting stuff, and I just passed out.
Well, I'm glad I sent that message over, huh, Julie?
And then I called you guys up, and you're like, oh, my God, is he going to call? And yeah, I managed to call exactly at the right time. I mean, I literally...
On the dot.
I ran into the kitchen, slugged down the super green drink, which should be kicking in about, 5 minutes, and I'll be going really fast. And
it does give you an advantage when you're psychic, huh?
The only reason why I'm here is because I'm psychic, I'm telling you.
Thank God for that.
Well, I appreciate that. I truly do. That's still... I have just got tons of questions to ask, and I have got to tell everybody that I have just listened to 3 hours of the most incredible CDs, and that's The Science of Peace. David, I got to tell you, you are an absolute genius. That is so life-changing for me, because it took every piece of the puzzle and put it all together in an understandable form. And it's just like, it's just pure clarity for me. And I thoroughly enjoyed every second of it. I've got to tell you. So after listening to that, the piece of science on how we can make all of the world a absolutely fabulous place, and all of the scientific data, how does that fit in with the law of attraction?
Well, that's a good kind of overarching question that we can jump off from. I want to back up just a bit and make a clarification, which is that these were originally intended as CDs. They are only available now in MP3 form, which you can download instantly from the website, divinecosmos.com. Mm-hmm. They are designed, this is another thing that you didn't explicitly say, so I'll just mention it.
Oh, please, yeah.
The recording was actually done in January 2005, and what happened was in February 2005, I delivered a lecture in LA at the Science of Mind Church in, I believe it was near Pasadena, and there was a guy there who happened to be a Hollywood film producer and said, if we took everything that you just said in this lecture and turned it into a film, it would be completely amazing. Mm. And that's what led to Convergence, the movie, getting started. So shortly after we finished this project, and I'll explain a little more about the project, we realized that the material that was in the CD series appeared to conflict too strongly with what we were going to do the movie about. So we had to essentially embargo the product for over 2 years. Oh. And it was only because of literally arguing with the lawyers and figuring out that, in the 2 years since this started, that the project has evolved enough now. It's become more of like a Da Vinci Code dramatic thriller in which the information is presented in the context of sort of a mystery narrative, mm-hmm. rather than, a straight-ahead documentary. Only then were we able to actually say, all right, we can release this, which I was very thrilled about. So given the fact that CDs are now just about dead, and it's much more difficult to, do the shipping and so forth, we figure, hey, why not offer everything as a download?
Absolutely.
So anyway, what happened was that I had gotten on Coast to Coast with George Norrie and Art Bell in 2004 on, I guess, 3 shows in a short span of time. One was about Casey, one was about interplanetary climate change, which we're going to discuss as we go on, and one was, I think I did one by myself that was just kind of an overview show. And you know, I got a number of people who signed up for psychic readings, which I was doing at that time. And one of them was this guy, Larry Sire, who is he calls me up on the phone in January and says, I've got 9 Grammys. And I was, in my classic Southern way, I was like, well, how many pappies you got?
Okay.
Well, yeah, I mean, so, yeah, I knew what he was talking about. It shocked me. I said, well, why do you want to work with me? He was asking me if I want to do music with him. And I said, well, of course. So what happened was, you know, I mean, right after I got off the phone with him, I booked an airplane ticket, and I went to his studio in Austin, Texas, which is called Electric Larryland. And I literally, I don't know if I should admit this or not, but you can back me up, Julie, I literally just sat down and delivered 3 lectures of material. I didn't have notes or preparation. I just said what needed to be said.
Well,
and,
you couldn't tell that. I mean, it was just so perfect. With the music in the background, I got to tell you, it was brilliant.
Well, that's what took so much time. I mean, literally, I got there at night, and then the next day I sat down. We did 3 lectures in a row. Each of which are like 66, 67 minutes long. So perfect CD length. And then the whole rest of the time, the real work was that we went in and we composed music behind every little nuance of what I was saying and just populated the CDs with the music. Specifically, I mean, this goes right down to like, where are the chord changes, you know, what instruments do we use, what kind of song do we use, what's the tempo. I mean, everything is perfectly built around the lecture. And there's really, as far as I know, nothing else like that where somebody in this metaphysical field has worked with such a high-profile musician and put something like that together. So it is available on my site. It's $39.99 if you just want the 3 lectures with the music in the background. It's $59.99 if you include 2 more CDs, which is all the music. Julie, you haven't actually heard that yet.
No, but I'm going to get it.
The first 3, but yeah, you can buy the music separately for $29.99. You get the 2 together, which is less. But it's a great way to help serve this work that we're doing. It's the primary thing we're offering to people as a way to be able to fund our operations because it keeps our overhead low. You know, we don't really have to do much except keep the website running. So my film producer calls it a license to print money. But it's so worth it. You know, it's premium content, and we put an enormous amount of time into it, and it basically represents what I feel to be the most important statement I'm here to give humanity.
Exactly. And as I said, it is very profound, very life-changing, and it puts all of the pieces together so that you can understand it. The message is outstanding, and I urge everybody to just go and get that. You will not be disappointed.
Well, let's talk a little bit about what that message is and really answer your question, because I don't want to just sound like I'm promoting a product without really saying why it matters. Essentially, what we are learning through science is that the ancient mystery teachings have long described that there is a harmony between the observer and the observed. In other words, the illusion of separation is just that. It doesn't exist. There is only unity. There is no I and you. There's only we, which is actually a oneness. There's no separate identity. There's no separate identity between physical matter and yourself. So on some level, you are the chair you're sitting on. You are the walls you're looking at as you listen to these words. The reality that you perceive as yourself is a distortion of the way the universe really works because, in fact, you are part of this living, omniscient intelligence that is largely shielded from your conscious mind. It's very important to draw a distinction, and this is what I do in my article, The Deeper Secret, in David's blog, which describes why a lot of the law of attraction stuff is still a partial teaching and not a completely enlightened teaching, is that your ego is not God. You know, if you're using a strict law of attraction modality, what you're saying is, because my ego wants this, it must be what God wants for me, and therefore I'm going to say that I want this, and then it's going to happen, and I'm going to get it.
Right.
But what I try to point out to people is that until you defragment your personality, which means deal with traumatic issues that happened earlier in your life, your ego may be desiring particular outcomes that are not in alignment with what's your purpose on this planet. And that's the only other thing I have on the site that's a musical product with voice behind it. Is called What is My Purpose? And the reason why I put that on there, it's a reading from my source, which you can read about on the site, because I do intuitive readings. It's the one question everybody would call and want to know, because I stopped doing readings in August 2005. I had 500 clients for the last 7 years before that. And everybody asked the same thing. It got to be like a running joke after a while. You know, and it's like, and I would feel bad because people are calling me and asking me to tell them what their life's purpose is. I'm saying, well, it's your life. I mean, what do you want to do with your life? What thrills you beyond imagination? You tell me, you know, and then find a way to make that passion something that you can live with. And that's what you guys are doing with this show, and that's a drive that we all have in ourselves to excel in a way that we really are passionate about.
Do you believe that that's because of preconditioning? As you're growing up, people putting thoughts in your mind that are not your own thoughts, to bring you to a point where now you're trying to manifest things that you think you want?
I think that that's how some of the less healthy desires are formed. I also believe in a destiny that is not related to the influences of our upbringing. In other words, if you look in the cases of reincarnation, some of these children come in and they're like flying on the piano. We were actually considering watching a movie that's out yesterday called Vitus, which is about this child prodigy genius on the piano.
Oh, right.
And then he's like, he doesn't want to play the piano, right? That's the whole point of the movie. If you watch the trailer, he's like, well, and then his father's like, I know, we'll make you a pilot. You know, anything besides the piano. So you're saying to yourself, okay, there's these kids out there. I mean, I saw one of them in Japan. I was on a 3.5-week tour of Japan one time, and I just walked into this guy's house, and there's this little bitty girl on the piano, and she is on fire, and I'm just like, holy crap. And they didn't even think it was a big deal. They're like, oh, come on, come on, come on. And I'm like, wait a minute, hold on here. This is just, but apparently over there's a lot of these kind of kids, and they didn't even think of anything special of it because she wasn't in like the absolute virtuoso top level. But I mean, I couldn't believe what she was playing, you know. So that's it's a tangential answer to your question, Andy, but the short and sweet version is that we arrange a life for ourselves, in my opinion, before we come into this incarnation. That's an esoteric viewpoint, and that means that we have already chosen who our parents are going to be. We've chosen to be born at a certain time where we have planetary alignment that is going to determine the influences that our personality has as we grow older. In fact, I was going back through readings that I did when it first started back in November '96, December of '96, and there was a line in there which I had ignored because, you know, I've got reams and reams of this stuff where it was allegedly my higher self talking, much in the same way that somebody like Esther Hicks channels Abraham, and that's become kind of the foundation of the law of attraction movement. I had the same thing happen to me starting in 1996. After a lot of work which I've described in previous audio blogs and other people's radio shows, so we don't need to go over it again, but you know, I woke up on November 10th, 96, and tuned in for the first time and paid attention to this still small voice that sounds like your imagination in the background, and just started to take dictation, write down what it was telling me. And I didn't want to understand it. I didn't make any effort to try to understand it, and that's a very, very important point. If you understand the words, then you're doing it incorrectly. So I just wrote down whatever. And the more crazy and weird it sounded, the better. I just wrote it all down. And I got done, and it was this phenomenal, sometimes very cryptic, very difficult to understand material, which started to do things like predict the future and give me guidance about my diet, which they said was, they meaning the source, whoever was speaking, said was, you know, clearly not in alignment with what my highest goals would be. One of the first things that they wanted me to stop eating was butter and dairy products. Yeah. So I use this product called Earth Balance, which is like a butter substitute. It's really good.
Right. Yeah.
So prior to '96, you must have still had a sense. You just became more aware of it in '96. But you know, reading your biography, when you were growing up, you knew there was something going on.
Right. I mean, that's backstory that I've been criticized by some of my readers that I go into it too much. So I'm trying not to have this content be the same as other content. But the very short abstract version is that I had dreams of UFOs and so forth since I was like born, basically. 2 years old, I remember the first one. 5 years old, I had an out-of-body experience. By 7 years old, I was reading books on how to develop your ESP, strengthen your ESP. So I was like one of those little piano prodigy kids, except I was trying to do it with ESP. And, you know, I was very accelerated in my reading level, which is why I was able to read adult books at age 7. And I was disappointed because the books are saying, well, you know, you're not really going to be that good unless you start at a young enough age. And I was thinking, I should have been doing this since I was 2 years old. Now I'm never going to be any good. So then after age 7, by the time I was in junior high, I had researched things like body language, palm reading. I got into tarot cards. I had a little stint with the Ouija board. By the time I was junior in high school, I was doing lucid dreaming, which was kind of like the fulfillment of my desire to have another out-of-body like I did when I was 5. Mm-hmm. Then I got into college and had a disclosure about UFO reality. A friend of mine had a college professor who said he worked for NASA through the 70s, and it was common knowledge in the higher echelons that UFOs had landed, and that the Roswell crash being one example, and that technology had been developed out of that crash, which led to all sorts of things we have, including bulletproof vests, laser lights, LED lights, infrared night vision, Velcro, Teflon, like the non-stick cooking, and which is in everything, by the way. Motor oil has Teflon, all kinds of stuff has Teflon in it now. But the most important one being computer chips. So I was left gobsmacked when I learned this, that we would not have a significant portion of our technology anywhere near as quickly as we did if it were not for this sort of celestial endowment that we had been granted. And that takes a whole different perspective on why are we the way we are. If that hadn't happened, think about it this way, right? Mm-hmm. How could we have resisted a world totalitarian government that's trying to form if we didn't have the internet at the end of this cycle? Mm. You know, imagine what these guys would be able to do right now if we didn't have the technology that we have to be able to actually subvert the media machine. I mean, I can tell you guys basically anything I want, and nobody is going to suddenly, hello, are you there, You know, it's not going to happen. We can do whatever we want, and that's why, you know, the technology has given us freedom, and that's a very important point. So it's not like you can say that these ETs are out there to try to have a cosmic barbecue party on Earth with humans being on the menu. That's not what this is about. It's about beings that are a lot more evolved than we are, who are trying to make sure that we don't destroy the planet. There's a major event that's happening right now, which involves the Earth itself starting to form a telepathic unity. We're starting to break down the walls of separation from one mind to another and have more and more telepathic interconnectedness. So a lot of the listeners tonight are probably experiencing things like synchronicity. And one example is where you look at the clock and it says 1111 or 444, 333, 1212, 111, 222, 555, all these kind of things. Yes. And you may be seeing it on license plates. You may see it on your odometer. You may see it just about anywhere. And the idea here is not that you're deliberately looking for it, but more like, let's say you've been reading a book for 3 hours in your recliner, like I was today, and then all of a sudden, in my case, I was synchronized so that I wouldn't miss this show, but in other cases, you just basically are suddenly influenced to look at the clock, and then you see these digits, and you haven't looked at the clock in so long, there's no way you could have known that it was going to be that time.
Right. And this means what?
Well, this is a very important thing because part of what it does is it helps you to step out of being the experiencer and into being the observer. You have to kind of step back for a moment from your life and say, what was I just thinking about right before I saw the synchronicity?
Oh.
And that's the trick. The trick is you always want to be able to rewind your thoughts so that when the synchronicity happens, you can say, all right, what was I thinking before this happened? And in the beginning, it's hard to do that because you're like, oh, my God, there it is again. It's so cosmic. But what you want to do is be able to say, okay, now what was I just thinking? What was just happening? And I've had very, very strange ones, which you can read about on my website, where, like, I'm driving down the road. I have this thought about how I was going to a gig in Poughkeepsie. There was a Dutchess Community College show. I was doing a recitation of Three Penny Opera. I was playing drums in the pit band, and I was on the way to the show. I was running a little late, and I was thinking, I really shouldn't be afraid of performing in front of audiences. I should just relax and go into it, and I really got to let go of my fear. And as I have this thought, I look at the clock. The clock says 5:55. I look at the odometer. The odometer says 3:33. And it starts pouring rain at exactly the same moment. Wow. So 3 different completely isolated events, each of which wouldn't necessarily be as impressive by themselves, but they all synchronized at once. Wow. And I had several of these kind of things happen in the early days when I was before I started to do the readings, and this was part of what kind of led to the telepathic contact being formed, was, sort of an extra physical reality began intruding into my life more and more. And when these intrusions are happening, you can't be content with saying, "Oh, this is just coincidence." It begins to break down the conditioning. We have this conditioning that says you're here in a body, all you have is this life, and then you're going to die, and that's it. And so, Andy, getting back to your question for a bit, the question being, are the things that you want influenced by what people have told you to want? One of the things that this synchronicity intrusion starts to do is it starts to sculpt how you think about what you want, because it will only happen when you're on the right track for what your higher self wants you to be doing. If you start getting locked up in a pursuit that's not in alignment with your purpose, then you're going to notice the synchronicities will wear off.
So
they won't be happening.
It won't manifest then.
Yeah. Synchronicities are showing you that you're on the right track. They're showing you that you're doing what your purpose has dictated. And therefore, it's a really important thing to use them as a gauge to assess how close you are to what your soul's purpose is. Because when you're on track with your soul's purpose, you can expect them to happen almost on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, they happen really fast.
Yeah. And it's a subjective, individual proof, and there's these higher beings out there, and they do exist. It's preposterous once we get into the science of consciousness to think that if we are immersed in a living consciousness field, which has properties that clearly demonstrate it exists throughout the entire known universe, it becomes extremely ridiculous to think that we're the only sentient organism in that universe, because the universe itself has conscious properties. That one of the things that we talk about in the Science of Peace series is that DNA itself is actually a wavelength in the field, and then the field shapes the molecule out of otherwise inanimate matter on a given planet. Now, that's a very heavy thing to say, but that's exactly what the research has shown us. You can
now, going along these lines, everybody talks about 2012 and where we're going with this, and I would just like to know what your feedback is on 2012 and what you think is going to happen between now and 2012 and what you think is going to happen in 2012.
Well, I can actually bridge the momentum I started on the DNA and take it right into that, so that's a good segue. to understand 2012, we're dealing with a very complex series of statements. Now, a lot of people say, well, who built the pyramids in Central America, Mesoamerica? Who designed the Mayan calendar? I've actually had some people call me a racist for saying that it was not designed by humans. But I'm okay with that because, you know, the fact of the matter is that nobody has the level of expertise, even now, to be able to fully understand even what the pyramids are for, much less how you would construct a calendar which just so happens to have all these synchronistic connections to other things. One of the first discoveries I had about the Mayan calendar ends in 2012, and that's equated in their equivalent of a cuneiform, which are called codices. They have these writings which basically describe that at the end of 2012, there's going to be the entrance into what they call a fifth root race, or a golden age. And, you know, root race implies a biological change, some kind of actual organismic change in how we look and how we function and how we think. There's a variety of data from a variety of ancient civilizations, each of which independently seems to confirm that we're going to be heading into, or that we are now in a phase of our evolution where there's a great deal of upheaval and turmoil in the earth, and things look really scary and negative, but it's all part of a cleansing, which is the essentially bringing forth of subconscious material that we've not yet dealt with on an individual level. And by it coming out on a collective level, we then get to experience a projection of our individual disharmony by seeing it outside ourselves. And this is a very important point. That's how we typically heal. It's very rare, until you become really advanced on the path of enlightenment, it's very rare to experience a true awareness of your subconscious material by yourself in meditation or just in contemplation. So what happens is, if you are a person who is habitually self-denying and lacking in self-esteem, do you honestly think that means you're going to attract someone to yourself who is going to just love you and treat you wonderfully?
No.
No.
Not the way it works. It's the other way around. We are, on a subconscious level, pathologically driven to keep seeking out the embodiment of our shadow. And we attract these people into our lives specifically so that either they rise with us in vibration, or we reach a point in which the lesson is that we have to get away from them. And they will typically embody our shadow aspects in an exaggerated way so that it's worse than how we are. And these people will typically drag us into great levels of despair. We actually refer to this as the dark night of the soul. So what's happening is, you're looking at, if you look at the world political stage as if it was a movie or a narrative, as we call it, you know, storyline, there is an ever-increasing tension in the narrative right now.
Yes.
It's looking really, but I don't see it as bad. I see actually that the more people finally become outraged, which I'm not, but you know, there's a necessary stage you have to go through where you are. The more outrage is formed in the collective consciousness, the less tolerance there will be for these behaviors to continue. And so now you're seeing subpoenas being handed out like Pez dispensers.
Right.
And it's not going to stop. We're going to see a revolutionary change in how things are being dealt with on the planet before 2012. The media itself is going to have to perform an act of contrition and begin acting more responsibly, because otherwise it's going to lose their advertisers, because the people in the board of directors on these corporations is going to say, well, I don't want to be pouring our advertising dollars into something that's obviously hypocritical that everybody can see is not telling the truth.
So let me ask you a question. So as we approach this 2012, will it be like a separation of consciousness, like there's a separation of classes where the more enlightened ones will be around the more enlightened ones, and the ones that aren't will be around them?
Well, I'm aware that starts sounding like evangelical, Bible-thumping.
I understand.
You know, and
or
that's
is everybody going to evolve at the same time at the same rate?
Well, it doesn't really work that way. There is a certain presence of mind to be said for things like the 100th monkey effect, in which, in Japan there were these islands where they threw sweet potatoes down to feed these monkeys, but as the sweet potatoes hit the ground, they'd be covered with sand. The monkeys couldn't eat them. And after 100 of the monkeys on the various islands discovered how to wash the potatoes, when that critical number was reached, suddenly all the monkeys overnight, it was like a Windows update that downloaded into everybody. They all were able to wash these potatoes simultaneously out of nowhere. So it seems as if, to a certain degree, there are behaviors and characteristics that will download into people's minds as enough people become aware of that, and that would kind of be your, the collective idea, a more socialist idea of ascension. However, the universe doesn't just hand out party favors if you haven't done the work to earn them. And so we are in a situation on the planet at this time in which people are being asked to draw upon their internal resources and find the love and the compassion, the service for others. And that's what really the Earth School is about. There's a lot of people here who don't need that level of tuition. There's approximately anywhere between 60 to maybe even 120 or even 200 million souls on the planet who are wanderers, and that means souls of an angelic essence who have volunteered to be human, knowing that they would give up their identity and forget who they are and go through one or even a series of human lifetimes for the sole purpose of trying to up-level the vibration on the planet. And so most of the people that are listening to this, who would bother to listen to this, are these angelic souls. And so they're not going to need the basic level of information about, oh, I need to be more loving. I shouldn't be manipulating, controlling people. But the basic level that you need to reach to be able to graduate into fourth dimension, which is where the Earth is going, fourth density as it's called, is basically just to have a higher priority on being loving towards people than on manipulating and controlling them. And believe it or not, that's a very difficult thing for the average person on this planet to achieve. And the reason why it's so difficult is, again, because there's all this shadow material buried in the subconscious mind, which is not something that people have conscious awareness of. It's something that stays locked up in this sort of realm in which people say, no, I'm a good person. I've never abused my kids. I never hit my kids. Well, you don't realize, psychological abuse that you might have done. People have had an affair or something. They block it out of their mind. They say, no, I love my wife. And so there's these things that we do that are intrinsically self-serving, in which we're manipulating others for our own benefit. And then we wallpaper over that as if it's not there. So the 2012 thing is not a cosmic light switch that's flipped in 2012. It's an active process that we're going through now, which is essentially fomenting the self-realization. It's forcing us into it, whether we want to see it or not. But bear in mind that if we don't choose to change, we don't automatically get shipped into a higher level of vibration. Now, there are some people on the planet who are also pursuing a negative spiritual path, a service to self path, and that is sort of like your Illuminati or New World Order type. And they also may be able to graduate into fourth density negative, which is sort of like the equivalent of dropping into a Hellraiser movie. And that's not any place I'd want to go, but there are some people who choose that. By the time you get up to the sixth density level, you can't really maintain the negative path for very long. Your soul literally dissolves. The universe itself is biased towards the positive, but it allows for the negative to exist because in the early days of the universe, we didn't have a negative path. We only had unity. And it was actually really bad in terms of the level of evolution. People were not growing and accelerating because there was nothing to work against. There was nothing to strive against. So we have a situation here where evil was created as part of the Creator's will to essentially inspire us to grow and to change and to evolve. So what's happening right now is that it appears as if really terrible things are happening on the planet, very scary things. But what that's doing is it's increasing the sense of jeopardy. you know, now that I'm working in Hollywood, I'm really deep into the meat of how these films are being constructed on the inside, all the stuff that you're not supposed to know about inner symbolism and secret metaphor and all this stuff. And the number one thing that you'll hear in an insider conversation about film and writing a good film is we need to have a mounting sense of jeopardy, right? And that's how you construct a good story. That's what it's all about, is increasing jeopardy, which is then resolved at the end of the film somehow.
Which keeps you involved in the movie. Exactly.
And so what's happening is that you have all these people who have been locked up in narcissism and a lack of self-reflection, distracted by the mundane pleasures of physical existence, locked up in their own world in which they have a box that they live in, a box that they're entertained by. They go to work in a box. They work in a cube farm, one cubicle at a time. It's all boxes that are four walls shielding us from other people. And when there is the perception of a unified threat and a vehicle of communication, which is the internet and email and instant messaging, cell phones and all that, people have an opportunity to break down their sense of isolation and say, my God, you need to see what's happening here. You know, yeah. It pulls you out of this chicken McNugget life and into sort of a, wow, we're all in the same restaurant here. You know,
well, that's a
we don't like what's being served.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And my question then is, because with this radio show, we're doing the World Joy meditation, in which people from all over Africa, everybody, they're tuning in to hear this. And it's based on joy, so we're hoping to uplift people. Is this correct? Should we be doing this? Is this going to make a difference? And will it make a difference if people come together? Because in the law of attraction, it's basically about you and how you feel as a person, not really connecting with other people, if I'm understanding the law of attraction right. So you can understand my little bit of confusion here.
Sure. And I'm glad you asked me that, Julie. You'd also apprised me of this issue in an email before the show, and I wanted to make sure we hit on that, so that's very good. There are problems, to put it bluntly, with the law of attraction as a model. And the problems are that we're getting back to an archetype, which I explained in my article series, The Deeper Secret, about how you approach your higher self. A strict interpretation of law of attraction as seen in the auxiliary materials and in the movie The Secret implies that the universe is an instant gratification machine. That the purpose of the universe is to basically be there to indulge your desire. And it's a very narcissistic view of the cosmos. It essentially implies that you're like a child walking through the grocery store. Mommy, I really want the marshmallows, you know, and okay, you can have the marshmallows. You really wanted it really bad. You attracted it. Here you go. And that's not how it works. You know, the people who make the most money off of the law of attraction teachings are the people who are charging exorbitant amounts of money to sell the knowledge to others.
Right. I agree wholeheartedly on that. You know, all they're doing is filling their own pockets.
Without naming names, there is a particular individual who is on the Secret film, and I saw one of his lectures, and he charges people $1,200 to take him to dinner and talk to him for a half an hour. And he gets it. I mean, he has somebody that pays him for that at every single show.
Oh, my goodness.
And you're talking about weekend lectures in which there's one full day and one half day in one location, and people are paying sometimes over $900.
I've seen it as high as $2,000.
Well, yeah, some of them have raised it, and in fact, I remember hearing not too long ago that he has now raised the rate because he was getting too much demand. He had to put it up even higher.
So this
and the reason why people would want to sign up for something like that is unremitted greed. It's basically them thinking, this guy is going to sell me something that's going to make me able to make money like he's making it.
Exactly.
So and that's the definition of the negative path. The negative path says, accept my enslavement over you so that you may in turn learn how to enslave others the way that I'm doing.
Ooh.
And it's a very scary thing, but that's what's really happening here. So there's two ways to approach your higher self. You can approach the higher self as a prostitute or as a maiden. The prostitute part is where you go up and you say, okay, higher self, this is what I want you to do for me. I want you to lie there in this position, put your leg up on top of the bed, you know, here's the silk handcuffs, blah, blah, blah. Let's go for it. The maiden is somebody who may be a virgin or just has a virginal mind, who's not just going to sleep with you because you want them to. You know, you need to actually have some game. You need to be able to, you know, experience a sharing of laughter and communication and go on dates with this person and sort of build a criteria for why you would end up romantically involved.
Right.
Which is a much healthier thing. So the problem with the law of attraction belief, which is endemic of our society, and that's part of why The Secret got to be so popular as a film, is that it enshrines the egoic mind as God. It says, well, whatever my ego wants must be the right thing. And so part of the 2012 experience that we're going through is shedding that illusion that our ego is the full definition of who we are. And synchronicity is a very important part of that. Synchronicity intrudes on complacency, because synchronicity is not just positive. Synchronicity can be very abruptly karmic events too. Karma is part of the manifestation of the higher self when you realize, my gosh, why did this terrible thing just happen to me? Why have I just gone through the same pattern with this person again when I said I never wanted to experience abuse again? All these things, when you really understand esoteric knowledge, there is nothing in your life that is not a project of very high magical intervention on behalf of your higher self. Every day you are experiencing the most significant, most poignant experiences to propel you into self-knowledge and enlightenment.
So is it true that there is nothing more important than feeling good? What is that statement then?
It is true that we are here ultimately to be experiencing oneness with the Creator. We do not want to experience separation. If we create God as some sort of entity that we have been abandoned by, which is what most people are subconsciously doing, then it implies that we're aspiring to something that is other than ourselves. And that's the illusion. The truth is, we cannot be divided from the oneness. We cannot be separated from the oneness. We are fully and intrinsically one with all others. We should not look up to celebrities as being better than ourselves. In fact, in the last few weeks in Hollywood here, I've met several celebrities in person. I didn't treat them like celebrities, because why would I put them on a pedestal and say that this man or this woman is better than I am? So neither should you look upon someone as less than. You know, I don't, if somebody's, when I walk out of the health food store and somebody says, could you give money to the homeless, I usually give it. And if I don't feel like giving it to them, I'll go out the other door, because I'd rather do that than look this person in the eye and deny them what they're asking for. Because I really do try to be balanced in terms of seeing everyone in compassion and truth and love.
Right.
And that can be a very difficult discipline. But what's happening is the 2012 event really involved, because I'm sensing what some of the callers would be asking. They're wondering, you know, what's going to happen? What's this 2012 thing really about?
Right.
And so, you know, telepathically, I'm starting to get some of these questions. But
yeah, our lines are
yeah, in fact, in another couple minutes, I think we should open them up, because I did promise that we would do that. But let's try to steer this all in 5 minutes before the 10 minutes before. Let's kind of reorient ourselves to sort of what's the big game here? What's this all going towards? We are going to experience, in my opinion, a discontinuous event in which the nature of matter, energy, and consciousness will shift in a sudden moment. And this gets back to what is really going on in the atom. The atom is not a little nucleus with little electrons flying around like a solar system. That's the old Rutherford/Bohr model of the atom, which has been scientifically disproven in so many different ways. And anybody who's seen What the Bleep Do We Know knows how extensively they drilled that into you, that there's a uncertainty principle. It looks like a wave sometimes, it looks like a particle sometimes, and a particle and a wave are two very different things. So what we're left with, actually, is there are scientists such as Dr. Moon. I only learned about this more recently, how he factored in. He was a government scientist who discovered that what was really going on in the atom was geometry, a harmonic geometry. And his science was brought into the deep black and was kept secret. Because when you understand geometry, you understand the secrets of things like anti-gravity, free energy, the real nature of DNA, the real nature of how proteins are synthesized, which is how our bodies are constructed. When you start realizing that the same harmonic geometry underlies the synthesis of DNA in your body, the same geometry can be seen as a global energy grid over this planet, which the ancients, every single one of 4,000 different pyramids, standing stones, Stonehenge, etc., are built precisely on the nodes of this grid, or the lines of the grid. The ancients knew about this geometry. It's the same geometry we see in the galaxy. It's the same geometry we see holding superclusters of galaxies together in a giant egg carton configuration. It's the same geometry that we see in the background dust from when the universe was formed. It forms into these shapes. So if the whole universe has a soccer ball geometry, basically, a dodecahedron, and that same geometry governs how your proteins are synthesized in your body, that starts to break down the idea that there's any separation. That same geometry makes matter. It makes atoms and molecules. And it's based on frequency. If you play a particular sound frequency, like C on the piano, middle C, for example, and then you take that waveform and you project it into a liquid that has some particles in it, like fine sand. The fine sand in the liquid will arrange into this geometry, and that's been proven by a scientist named Dr. Hans Jenny, and then by another scientist named Dr. Buckminster Fuller, among others. What that means is that there are, the ancient esoteric knowledge says that there is the universe was created from the Aum, the primordial sound. And that's actually true. The universe is essentially a frequency. And that's why when we're talking about raise your vibration, it's actually a very real thing. That there is a certain geometric frequency that the Earth's grid has right now, which is sort of an icosahedron, dodecahedron combination. And of course, in order to know what I'm talking about, you're going to have to look at the website. But that's what it is right now. You can see an article on my site called Hyperdimensional Nebula, Cubes in Space in the 2012 Case.
Yeah.
And that gives you all this information I'm saying right now. But anyway, the geometry of the Earth's grid is changing. And that's why there's probably going to be a magnetic pole shift, is that when the geometry changes, the axis of the Earth will change because the geometry has a different axis. So it's not like we're going to avoid all these Earth changes from happening. However, in the process of the Earth's geometry changing, we get a global effect that's similar to the Bermuda Triangle, in which each person will experience a shift over into what we now think of as the astral plane. So by decoding this law of one material, which is sort of the undergirding architecture of where I've put all this stuff together from, we can see that 2012 appears to be this shift in matter, energy, and consciousness, which will propel us into a multidimensional state, so that even though the Earth will experience sort of an upheaval, none of us are going to be here for it. Now that gets into the question of, okay, everybody is going to experience that, but whether you will actually stay on the Earth for much more than another 100 to 700 years in this astral plane before you reincarnate back into the physical plane, whether you stay here or not, that depends on your level of consciousness. And so there are some people who, once this shift happens, will immediately be propelled into what we could call the ascension, which is sort of like an overall soul review of all your past lives and sort of putting all that together. Other people will kind of hang out in the equivalent of the astral plane, sort of like the afterlife, and they won't realize that the Earth has changed. They won't realize that this event has happened. They will forget that there was a change, and they will assume that everything is normal.
So you're saying that in the year 2012, we are no longer going to exist? The end of the world happens?
The Earth will not exist in space-time. The people on the Earth will not be living in the level of it that we now live in. They will be living in an inverted reality called time-space. And again, this sounds very sci-fi and probably makes me sound like a complete wacko, but what you really have to go so far into the science to understand how this would even function. But the easiest way to explain it is Bermuda Triangle, where you have multiple reports of like planes flying through and disappearing, or ships coming out where there's nobody on the ship. This is part of a real science that our government has been hiding from us. How, when you raise the frequency high enough, that you get a dematerialization. And that's what this is all leading to. This is leading to everyone having a reality shift at the same time. And when you go into this new reality, you will have the ability to do things that you never could have done before. Regardless of whether you're on the positive path or the negative path or you're indifferent, if you try to levitate, you may discover that you will be able to. If you try to heal someone, you may be able to. If you try to hear other people's thoughts telepathically, you may be able to. And part of the problem is, do you even bother to try? So that's part of what's going to happen after 2012. And still, the criteria after 2012 is going to be, do you get it about loving and helping other people? Or do you continue to manipulate and control them?
Yeah, self-abundance, you know?
Exactly. Yeah. So we're really heading into this phase of our existence where this is going to happen to everybody. It's an irreversible shift. There's no get-out-of-jail-free card. So if you're afraid of it, I would recommend meditating on, am I really loving others? Am I really serving others? Because there's no reason to be afraid. That's probably another one of the standard phone calls that we have, is, you know, this sounds terrifying. There's really nothing terrifying about it. It's a consciousness shift that requires our participation. We have to co-create the reality that we're going into. And that's really the law of attraction you'd want to focus on is, am I attracting good karma by being of service and by loving other people? Because when you do that, then the manifestations that you seek will begin happening. You will be given what you need to fulfill your service. Well, let's at least toss in a few calls here, because
okay, we've got just a couple of minutes left, so I'm going to open up one call here and see what happens.
Okay.
And they probably have been hanging on so long there, and I can't get it. But at the same time, here we are. Hello there. Are you still there? Area code 310. Nope, they're not there. We have had all of the lines were, and I think they just I just lost them all.
Okay. Well, in that case, then if we don't have much time, we'll try to create a summary statement. Is there anything that you feel that I should cover that I haven't already said?
So I do want to know, when we have the World Joy meditation, what should we be focusing on? Oh,
that's a good point. This ties back into the Science of Peace material that you were so excited about at the beginning. We are already experiencing a reality in which the thoughts that we have in our conscious mind are not our own thoughts only. We are constantly being influenced by other people's thoughts. And it is a scientific reality. It's been established as statistical reality that a small group of people in meditation, under the same roof in that case, 7,000 people in one auditorium, were able to reduce global fatalities, acts of terrorism, acts of harm to others by 72%. That means that 3 out of 4 people who would pick up a gun and shoot someone didn't do it during this meditation. There are experiments in Russia where they took these giant pyramids with 72-degree angles, 144 feet tall, and put salt and pepper in the pyramid, and then distributed that salt and pepper to various jails in Russia. And then the prisoners suddenly got much nicer to each other and healed from addiction and, stopped acting violently. So the pyramids also were able to reduce or eliminate earth change activity. They reduced earthquakes, they reduced severe weather, they purified water. So this is a consciousness science that shows how our individual self has an effect on the level of cataclysms on the earth, the level of war on the earth. That's why a global meditation is so important, because if you think of it as like a room where the temperature is getting hotter and hotter, and as the temperature goes up, people get more and more irritable, they yell and scream at each other. The meditators are like these blasts of air conditioning that cools everything down. So a worldwide meditation has the objective of basically injecting that cool energy, chilling people out. And so what you want to do is focus on the highest frequency that you can. You want to be in basically ecstatic, blissful state. You don't want to let your ego chatter. You want to try to just not think anything, but just experience extreme gratitude. Gratitude is really the key word to focus on.
Wow.
And that frequency of gratitude is an energy that's of a higher vibration, which actually can correlate with a higher geometry. And it helps our planet get through this change, because all the Earth changes are a function of disharmony being projected out into the world. It's not a function of collective unity. The Earth changes wouldn't be happening if we didn't need that as a metaphor of our own storm. So when you see a storm or when you see a heat wave, which is happening now, it's collective paranoia and anger and fear. And so as we move into trust and as we move into a greater acceptance that we're not in an Armageddon, we're in a collective awakening, and this is actually a wonderful time to be on the planet, not a terrifying time.
Yeah.
When you can have that shift, then you're beginning to take mastery over your life and not letting life master you.
And that's a perfect place to end it.